Hello and good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful but chilly Wednesday morning here on January 8th here in the DFW Metroplex. My name is Justin Nimergood. I am your host of newly launched podcast, Real Estate Rockstars, where we bring on some of the best and brightest across the industry every week to share their insights, their perspective, and even their stories that makes them great. Today, I am honored to have Ryan Schmid on the show with me today. Ryan and I met actually kind of by chance. This was a couple months ago as he was reaching out to, solicit, I'd say, strategic partnerships. And it's been a beautiful partnership ever since. So just a little bit on Ryan before we get into things. He's originally from Pittsburgh. After he finished his MBA at West Virginia Wesley College, he moved to Dallas, Texas, and this was in 2016. Through courses taken to graduate with his MBA, he was most fascinated with finance. And the mortgage industry was not actually something he ended up planning on going into, but it really became a natural fit with his specific skills and interests. He's spent most of his career at Guaranteed Rate, but it recently took a position as the Dallas Director of Sales with Neighborhood Loans in October of 2023. Last year, they welcomed the birth of their first child, Ryan Schmid Jr., also known as RJ. And in 2025, they're getting married. He's getting married to his fiancee, Jackie Valentino. While not working, Ryan enjoys spending time with his family, working out as a board member of Powerhouse Investing Group, cheering on the Dallas Stars, and finding a day to make positive impact on someone. Just some accolades that he shares: Scotsman's Guide top 1% producer in 2021 and 2022, Scotsman's Guide Emerging Star in 2023, D Magazine top producer 2019 to 2024. Wow, that's one of the most recognized real estate magazines here in the DFW Metroplex. President's Club 2021, 2022, 2024. And he's currently helped over 750 families purchase homes and originated over 250 million in volume. With all that said, I'd like to welcome Ryan Schmid to the show. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin. I was honored to get on the podcast with you when you reached out, and I'm excited to share my knowledge with everybody and hopefully make a positive difference on anybody who's either interested in real estate or interested in purchasing a new home.
Absolutely. So let's start with one that's just going to kind of give our listeners an opportunity to understand your background a little bit further. Can you share what really inspired you to pursue a career in real estate? It sounds like you had many options out there, but ultimately there was actually a tight fit with real estate.
Yeah, so my master's degree, my concentration was actually healthcare administration. So, a mortgage is a funny thing. You never talk to anybody and they're like, yeah, I was a little kid and I always wanted to be a mortgage lender. So I was fortunate that in my fifth year when I was finishing up my MBA, I had a friend move down to Dallas. He got into the industry and it was kind of like a Wolf of Wall Street moment. I was getting some job offers out of college for $45,000, $47,000, and he was sending me pictures of his paycheck making, $10,000 to $12,000 every 2 weeks. And so honestly, I was like, hey, let's give it a shot, right? So getting into the industry, I was very money motivated, and more millionaires come from real estate and finance than any other industry. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was attracted to, the money and took an opportunity, and it's worked out pretty well for me so far.
That's awesome. And thank you for your transparency and honesty. I feel like sometimes people, depending on their profession, will try to shy away from, oh yeah, it's because of the money. But if we really are honest with ourselves, deep down, a lot of reasons people take jobs on or projects on, for that matter, is money motivated. So that's great, Ryan. So right now there's a lot of evolution that's happening in the real estate industry, right? We have a new president in office, or will be in office here soon. We're waiting patiently to see if maybe rate cuts come or don't come. What do you personally see as the biggest challenge facing the real estate industry today?
The biggest challenge, I would say, is without a doubt inventory. Inventory has been the biggest problem in the real estate industry for a while. It was extremely exposed during COVID. We definitely saw here in DFW the money coming from California and out of state, where those type of buyers were able to offer $50,000, $70,000 over asking cash, guarantee those prices, and cause a drastic increase in purchase prices. Now, anybody who's expecting a market crash, sorry to tell you, it's not going to happen. We're not going to see purchase prices go back down to where we saw pre-COVID. Now, going into this election, there was a small focus on addressing this issue. It wasn't one of the major ones. There's some reports that show that we have anywhere from an 8 to 10 million housing shortage across the country. There's some reports that show we have a $20 million or 20 million unit shortage across the country. So inventory is definitely one of the biggest problems. And unfortunately, it's not something that's going to be able to be fixed overnight. So Trump, obviously being a real estate guy, economy is one of his biggest, prideful things that he takes on. And so hopefully he gives some incentives to home builders to start, expediting the permits, surveys, and hopefully we see a lot of new homes getting built over the next 4 years, which that added inventory can hopefully start to bring down some home prices. But if you're waiting for, home prices to come down 100,000, 150,000, sorry to tell you, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned the home prices coming down, and it's like, you can't ever go back to that time before, really. I mean, unless we were to have a market crash, for that matter. That's really sound advice for everyone out there. So what do you see the future of real estate, the real estate landscape looking like then?
Well, in my 8 years, the only constant in real estate has been change. On the horizon, what I would say could potentially be the biggest change that we'll see in real estate is going to be the privatization of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So if you don't know what those are the two government sponsoring entities that oversee all of the lending process in the housing market. Trump, billionaire Bill Akerman, he talks about, Trump loves big deals. I don't think that's a secret, right? If we could privatize these two entities, that would make massive changes across the real estate industry. If you look at the shares of those two stocks, they're up over 125% since the election. So they're talking about this is definitely something that they want to see happen. It's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. 2026 to 2027 is when they're kind of predicting. And there's a lot of speculation on exactly what that could mean. Some of the highlights, I would say, is going to be in the short term. The one thing the markets do not like is uncertainty. We'll probably see interest rates continue to climb if this looks like a reality. People who are self-employed, were like, recently, I had a director on a fairly popular TV show. He's been directing for 10 years. The problem with people in that industry is they're not working week to week, right? They get on to a show, they film that show ends. So he finished up wrapping this show in the middle of November. Well, they wanted to go through Chase Bank. They thought this would be easy to go through Chase. And, ultimately they were supposed to close at the end of December. Real estate agent calls me, tells me Chase ultimately denied him. And the reason they denied him is because currently he's not working the show. Now, obviously, he's been doing this for 10 years. We're looking at like the history of his job employment. Really shouldn't be any issues with him being able to get approved for a loan today. But because currently on the lending side and the government oversight and how complicated each individual guideline is, because he currently doesn't have a job, and we don't know when his next job will start, we technically can't use any qualifying income from him currently. Granted, this is something that should have gotten caught up front. Ultimately, it didn't. But with the privatization of these GSEs is where with the private money, we can look at underwriting as more of a common sense approach, right? This guy's been making this type of money for the last 10 years. Obviously, he has breaks in between shows. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be able to qualify until he starts the next shows. For real estate agents, right? Obviously with being 1099 and self-employed, what you claim on your tax returns, right, is what currently lending goes off of your taxable income, not your gross. But on top of that, right now there's an additional layer. If you had a great 2023, right, and you claimed a lot of money on your tax returns, we know in real estate, December, January, February are typically the slowest years in the market. But if you didn't have a lot of home sales in those 3 months, they could ultimately deny you based on your most recent 3 months of sales being lower than what you claimed and paid money on for your tax returns in the previous years. People that have ITINs, right? So there's a lot of unique scenarios where people aren't able to qualify right now. And that's one thing that can really change and allow a lot more people to qualify easier, with a little bit more common sense to underwriting practices.
That's some really sound advice and a great market analysis of really what's going on out there, in the trenches, so to speak. So I'm curious, as someone who has obviously paved your way, been successful in your space, what is a typical day like for you? And, what do you think are some of your best qualities that make you excellent at your job?
Yeah, so every day, whether I want to or not, I'm up at 5:55, feed the dogs, take the dog for a walk, gym, come back home, shower, probably spend about a half an hour with my family before I leave for the day, and then ultimately am in the office by 8:39. Currently in my situation, I come in the morning, try to talk to each one of my individual employees while you're getting coffee and water. And ultimately kind of when I come in and, kind of how I plug it, once I put these, I guess you can't see with the blur, but once I put my headsets on, it's go time. And if my phone isn't ringing by 9:30, I force the action. So anybody familiar with the core knows about your theme days and the phone calls that you're supposed to make in accordance with which day of the week it is. That typically takes me about 2.5 to 3 hours. With those phone calls, I'll schedule applications for the following day between 2 and 5 o'clock. Between 12:30 and 1 to 2 o'clock before I start taking the appointments I made the previous day. I'll put out any fires, check with my team again, make sure they're good. They know what they need to be working on. And then 2 to 5 o'clock, I'll take as many mortgage applications as I can with new clients. That's the theory. Mm-hmm. I can tell you probably about 2 out of the 5 days of the week go kind of along the plan. But in this industry, you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to answer emails while you're on the phone, dealing with another problem, because, there's just so many different things that come up. You don't know who's going to also be reaching out to you at this point, with what problem that you got to solve. And, everything is kind of like needs to be taken care of now, right? And I get myself on real-time communication. So, when people call me, they get an answer right away. So you just got to be versatile. You have to know how to fix problems quickly and work in unison with the people around you and your real estate agent partners as well.
That's fantastic, Ryan. See, oftentimes I see a lot of people in the industry take the freedom for granted too much, but clearly you're not one of those people. And I think that speaks volumes to the success you've had. So moving right along, you know, what would you say is your favorite part of the home buying experience that you have with your clients?
Say my favorite part is being able to share all of the education that I've learned, not only through home buying, but, disclaimer, I'm not a, financial advisor, but in my head, right, learning from seeing what other people's mistakes are and being able to share that knowledge. Through the courses I've taken to get my master's degree, I can tell you that about 1% of that relates to the real world, right? How much I've learned about credit, taxes, income, and how to really take advantage of all of the programs. And the one thing that, when I get referred to a client who said, I already got pre-approved from somebody else. When I go through a mortgage application with a client, I'm extremely transparent. And I have certain points throughout that application where on the first point, I'll ask them like, hey, did the other lender talk to you about this? Right? Because I don't want to repeat myself.
Right.
And the first time it's always like, I'm not sure if they did, but go ahead and go through it anyways. Okay, happy to. And then the second time I'll get to another point. I ask them like, hey, did the other lender already talk to you about this? Because I don't want to repeat myself. And they're like, no, they didn't tell me anything about this. Right. And then the third and final time, I'll start to go through that process. And then I'll stop them and be like, I'm going to guess the other lender didn't cover any of this with you either. And we'll share a little laugh and be like, no, he didn't. Right. So when I can go through an application with a client who is already pre-approved somewhere else, who thought like, hey, this is this easy, I know everything. And then when they go through it with me and they thank me, right, for being so thorough with them to where they have a lot more understanding and they can make the decision that's truly best for them with the knowledge that I've given them. That's the best part for me.
That's fantastic, Ryan. You clearly have a good grasp of the market and what's going on, and obviously how to add value, I would say, to your clients on a consistent basis. So we're going to actually move on to the final section of our time together, where I'm going to ask you a couple questions that are sort of future looking. They're a little bit abstract, but they're meant to be that way, just to give the listeners out there a little bit more peeling back the layers of your onion so we can really figure out who Ryan Schmid is. So the first question is, let's say it's your 80th birthday. Who is there and what is going on and why?
80th birthday. Well, God bless, I'm still here. So my birthday is always kind of similar because my birthday is November 4th, which always, every 4 years always falls around presidential election. So something with that, I would say I'm surrounded, with my wife, my kids, their kids at this point. And we're still actively engaged, in the community. Maybe we're out campaigning for our candidate at that time. Definitely something to where I don't see myself sitting around the table eating cake, blowing out candles. I still I love being engaged in the community and getting my thoughts and helping people. So I would say we do something special for 80 and getting out there and either, as I said, campaigning for the candidate or doing some type of activity.
Wow. That's a great answer. I mean, I think anytime you think about what the future looks like, way down the road like that, sometimes it's hard to ascertain, but clearly you have a vision for yourself and for the future. So the next question is, imagine that it's your last day on Earth and you can only preserve 3 items in your so-called time capsule. What are those items and why?
Ooh. I'd go with the Holy Bible,
Mm-hmm.
a bottle of Basil Hayden whiskey,
Okay.
and I would say one of David Goggins' books. So I like, being an athlete and somebody just who focuses on mental toughness. I love the fact that he is this elevated figure, right? And everybody looks at him as somebody who, just no matter what, he's just always able to go. But he's transparent by the fact that, hey, some days I don't feel like doing this, but it doesn't matter. You got to do it anyways.
Right.
And that type of mentality, because there's days I don't feel like doing it, but I have clients, I have family, I have employees who are depending on me to show up and get the job done. So I go with those three. And, sometimes a little bit of whiskey gets you through those hard days too.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And clearly, your staff and everyone that works with you is lucky to, be working with someone that takes this so seriously. So often I unfortunately see some people in different sects of the industry really being all about me. They're being me centric. And unfortunately, that's just not the way to approach anything in business, in my personal opinion. So last question for you. What is your definition of a real estate rock star?
Definition of a real estate rock star is somebody who gives the most when they don't feel like doing it. They're the best when you least feel like doing it. Just kind of touching on the last point is, everybody has days you don't feel like doing it, but there's times where people count on me. How many people I have counting on me on a daily basis? You have to show up. You have to be your best, regardless of how you feel, and you make a positive impact on the people around you, right? Kind of going back to the first question you asked me, what got me into the industry? It was money. But, at a certain point, once you make enough money, it doesn't do it for you anymore. So my vision has shifted to, making a positive impact on one person every day and making sure that I make a positive impact on the people around me as well.
Wow. Bravo. Well, very well said, Ryan. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on with us today on our inaugural episode, might I add. This is officially episode 1 of the Real Estate Rockstars here today. So it was great having someone like yourself on to really help us kick this off and launch this into the stratosphere in the right way. So before we wrap, can you just share where can people find and connect with you?
Best place, RyanSchmidMortgage.com. All my contact information is on there. We're working on, getting on the Instagram, the TikTok, and everything like there. But for the most part, RyanSchmidMortgage.com. All my contact information is on there. Calendly links on there. Send me a text, send me an email. We'll set up an appointment. I'd love to help you, talk to you, regardless of what your, real estate goals are. I'm always available, happy to help.
That's great, Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on our show today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. Hopefully I set the bar high for the next person. Thank you for having me, sir.
That's right. All right. We'll see you soon, listeners. Coming next week with our new guest to be announced.
All right, Justin.